Between 1984 and 1988, over 400 ships were attacked in the Persian Gulf. Tankers burned, sailors perished, oil platforms exploded, mines floated in shipping lanes. It was the largest naval conflict since World War II, and most Americans have never heard of it. This is the full story of the Tanker War, the forgotten conflict that explains everything happening in the Persian Gulf today. Subscribe, because this war never really ended. The Iran-Iraq War began in September 1980. Saddam Hussein, Iraq's dictator, invaded Iran expecting a quick victory. The Iranian military was in chaos after the 1979 revolution. The Shah's American-trained army had been purged. It should have been easy. It wasn't. Iran rallied. The Revolutionary Guards proved fanatical defenders. What Saddam expected to take weeks turned into months, then years. By 1984, the war was a bloody stalemate. Millions of soldiers faced each other across trenches that resembled World War I. Neither side could win on land, so Iraq changed strategy. Iran's economy depended on oil exports. Tankers carried that oil through the Persian Gulf to customers worldwide. If Iraq could stop those tankers, they could strangle Iran's economy and force surrender. In early 1984, Iraq began systematically attacking tankers bound for Iranian ports. The tanker war had begun. Iraq's primary weapon was the Exocet missile. French-built, sea-skimming, and deadly accurate, the Exocet had proven its effectiveness in the Falklands War just 2 years earlier. Iraqi jets, Mirage F-1s, and Super Etendards would fly over the Gulf, acquire targets, and launch. The attacks were indiscriminate. Any ship near Iranian waters was a potential target. Neutral flags didn't matter. Warning shots weren't given. By the end of 1984, Iraq had struck over 50 vessels. Iran had to respond. But Iran had a problem. Their air force was crippled. The Shah's fleet of American F-14s was grounded for lack of spare parts. They couldn't match Iraq's air attacks. So Iran focused on what they could do. The Revolutionary Guard Corps created a naval branch, small, fast boats armed with rockets, missiles, and machine guns. These boghammers swarmed through the Gulf, attacking tankers heading to Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Why Kuwait and Saudi Arabia? Because they were funding Iraq's war. Iranian logic was simple. If you pay for our enemies, you're our enemy too. Iran also deployed a more insidious weapon, mines. Simple, cheap, and deadly. Mines could be laid at night from small boats. A single mine could cripple a massive tanker. And finding mines was far harder than laying them. The Gulf was becoming a death trap. By 1986, the tanker war had reached a crisis point. Over 200 ships had been attacked. Insurance rates for Gulf shipping skyrocketed. Some companies refused to sail there at all. The world economy depended on Gulf oil. Approximately 20% of the world's petroleum passed through the Strait of Hormuz every day. If that flow was interrupted, the global economy would suffer. Something had to be done. Kuwait approached both superpowers with a proposal. Reflag our tankers under your flag and protect them. The Soviet Union agreed first. They offered to lease tankers under the Soviet flag with Soviet naval escorts. This terrified Washington. Soviet naval presence in the Persian Gulf? During the Cold War? That couldn't be allowed. President Reagan authorized Operation Earnest. The United States would reflag 11 Kuwaiti tankers as American vessels. American warships would escort them through the Gulf. Any attack on a reflagged tanker would be an attack on America. It was a massive commitment. It was also a gamble. Operation Earnest launched on July 24, 1987. The first convoy consisted of 2 reflagged tankers, the Bridgerton and the Gas Prince, escorted by 3 U.S. Navy warships. The convoy entered the Gulf to great fanfare. This was America demonstrating its commitment to free navigation. This was America protecting the global economy. And within hours, it nearly became a disaster. At 5:30 a.m. on July 24th, the Bridgerton struck a mine. The explosion ripped a hole in the tanker's hull. Oil leaked into the Gulf. The massive ship began taking on water. But the Bridgerton didn't sink. She was so large that the mine, while damaging, couldn't destroy her. She continued into port under her own power. The escorting warships, however, were humiliated. The Navy destroyers and frigates were far more vulnerable to mines than the tanker they were protecting. After the Bridgerton struck the mine, the escorts fell in behind her, letting the tanker lead the way through potentially mined waters. The image of American warships hiding behind a commercial tanker was not what Reagan had intended. The Navy rushed minesweepers and mine-hunting helicopters to the Gulf. They needed to find those mines before more ships were hit. But finding the source of the mines was even more important. On September 21, 1987, American forces caught Iran in the act. Army helicopters from the 161st Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers, were patrolling the Gulf at night when they spotted the Iran Ajr, an Iranian vessel, laying mines. The helicopters attacked, killing several crew members and disabling the ship. Navy SEALs boarded and captured the vessel. In the holds, they found more mines, ready to be deployed in shipping lanes. It was conclusive proof that Iran was mining international waters. Iran had been denying it for months. Now there was no doubt. But the mines kept coming. And then Iran escalated further. On October 16, 1987, an Iranian Silkworm missile struck the reflagged tanker Sea Isle City near Kuwait. The Silkworm was a Chinese-made anti-ship missile, much larger than the weapons Iran had used before. It hit the Sea Isle City in the crew's quarters. Captain John Hunt was blinded by the blast permanently. 18 crew members were wounded. America had to respond. 3 days later, the U.S. Navy launched Operation Nimble Archer. 4 destroyers, USS Hole, USS Kidd, USS Leftwich, and USS John Young, converged on 2 Iranian oil platforms in the Rostam field. These platforms weren't just oil infrastructure. They were military outposts, equipped with radar, communications equipment, and anti-aircraft guns. Iran used them to coordinate attacks on shipping. The Navy gave Iran 20 minutes to evacuate. Then the destroyers opened fire. After the shelling, SEALs boarded the platforms. They collected intelligence, planted explosives, and destroyed both structures. Operation Nimble Archer was the first direct American military action against Iran since the 1979 hostage crisis. It wouldn't be the last. The escalation continued into 1988. Iranian Revolutionary Guard boats grew bolder. They harassed shipping, laid mines, and fired on aircraft. Every week brought new incidents. The Navy responded with Operation Prime Chance, an aggressive campaign using Special Forces helicopters to hunt Iranian boats at night. The Night Stalkers and SEAL teams became adept at nocturnal warfare in the Gulf. They intercepted mine-laying vessels, destroyed armed boats, and kept pressure on Iran. But Iran kept pushing. On April 14, 1988, everything changed. The USS Samuel B. Roberts, a Perry-class frigate, was on patrol when she struck an Iranian mine. The explosion was devastating. It cracked the ship's keel, flooded the engine room, and nearly broke the Roberts in half. 10 sailors were seriously wounded. Only extraordinary damage control efforts saved the ship. The crew fought fires, sealed compartments, and kept their vessel afloat through sheer determination. When the mine was analyzed, it was traced to the same batch captured from the Iran Ajr 7 months earlier. Iran had struck again. Reagan authorized a full retaliation. Operation Praying Mantis launched on April 18, 1988. It was the largest American naval battle since World War II. The operation had 2 surface action groups, each assigned to destroy an Iranian oil platform. But the real objective was to engage and destroy Iranian naval forces. Iran obliged. When American ships approached the Sassan platform, Iranian forces on the platform opened fire. The American response was overwhelming. The platform was destroyed within hours. At the Siri platform, the same pattern repeated. Warning, resistance, destruction. But the real action came at sea. Iranian missile boats attempted to attack the American groups. They were destroyed by helicopter gunships and naval gunfire. The Iranian frigate Sabalan one of the largest vessels in Iran's navy, sortied to challenge the Americans. She fired on U.S. aircraft. American jets responded with Harpoon missiles and laser-guided bombs. The Sabalan was hit multiple times. She caught fire and began sinking. Only a direct order from Washington stopped the final blow. The Sabalan was left burning but afloat, a decision later questioned by naval officers. But the Sabalan's sister ship, the Sahand, was not so lucky. When the Sahand fired missiles at American aircraft, she signed her death warrant. Wave after wave of missiles and bombs struck her. She exploded and sank, taking most of her crew with her. By the end of April 18th, Iran had lost half of its operational naval fleet. 2 frigates, 1 sunk, 1 crippled, multiple patrol boats destroyed, 2 oil platforms leveled, dozens of Iranian sailors gone. It was a devastating blow from which Iran's navy never fully recovered. The tanker war continued for a few more months, but the intensity had dropped. Iran, battered by the losses of Praying Mantis and exhausted by 8 years of war with Iraq, began seeking a ceasefire. On August 20th, 1988, the Iran-Iraq War officially ended. Over 1 million people had lost their lives. Cities had been devastated. Chemical weapons had been used on both soldiers and civilians. And in the Gulf, over 400 ships had been attacked. Dozens of sailors from countries across the world had perished. The war ended where it began, with the borders essentially unchanged. 8 years of slaughter for nothing. The tanker war left lasting legacies. For the U.S. Navy, it was the most significant combat since Vietnam. Officers who served in the Gulf in the 1980s would lead forces in Desert Storm, the War on Terror, and beyond. For Iran, the losses of Praying Mantis were seared into military memory. To this day, Iranian naval doctrine focuses on asymmetric warfare, small boats, mines, missiles, rather than conventional fleet engagements. For the Gulf region, the war demonstrated American commitment to protecting oil shipments. That commitment continues today. But perhaps the most important legacy is strategic. Iran learned that it could not defeat America in conventional naval warfare, so it developed other strategies: terrorism, proxies, asymmetric tactics. The Revolutionary Guard boats that harass shipping today are descendants of the boats from the tanker war. The mines that threaten the Gulf are the same types used in 1987. And the playbook, attacking oil infrastructure, threatening the Strait of Hormuz, using proxies to strike from a distance, was written in the 1980s. Everything happening in the Gulf today echoes the tanker war. When Houthis attack ships in the Red Sea, they're using Iranian weapons and tactics developed in the 1980s. When Iran seizes tankers near the Strait of Hormuz, they're executing plays from the tanker war playbook. When America deploys carrier groups to the Gulf, they're continuing a commitment that began with Operation Earnest. The tanker war never really ended. It just paused. The men who served in the Gulf during those years deserve to be remembered. The crew of the Samuel B. Roberts, who saved their ship through extraordinary courage. The SEALs who boarded the Iran Ajr and countless other vessels. The night stalkers who hunted Iranian boats in the darkness. The sailors of the Stark, 37 who never came home, struck by missiles from Iraq, America's awkward ally. And the pilots, service warriors, and support personnel who made Operation Praying Mantis the decisive victory it was. They served in a war that most Americans didn't know was happening. They fought and sacrificed in a conflict that never made headlines. And they established American presence in the Gulf that continues to this day. 4 years, over 400 ships attacked, one forgotten war. This is the story of the tanker war. Now you know why the Persian Gulf is the way it is. Now you understand why Iran acts the way it does. Now you see the pattern that keeps repeating. The tanker war explains today's headlines. Every time you see news about Gulf tensions, about Iranian drones, about Houthi missiles, remember 1984 to 1988, because that's where it all started. Subscribe for more hidden military history. Share this video so this war isn't forgotten. Comment, is America still fighting the tanker war? This video is for everyone who served in the Gulf, 1984 to 1988. You fought a war most people don't remember. We remember now.